The ethics of North Dakota Democratic office holders and the 2001 CBO projected 5.6 trillion budget surplus. Part 3, Representative Earl Pomeroy, Democrat from North Dakota. There are already videos available for Senator Kent Conrad and Senator Byron Dorgan, both Democrats from North Dakota, for their portrayal of the 5.6 trillion budget surplus projection. This video focuses primarily on Representative Earl Pomeroy, according to his website, proudly serving North Dakota. It also includes references to the other two Democrats because we know deception does not occur in a vacuum. The Code of Ethics of Government Service covers all three politicians, and here is a brief summary of a few points. Number 1, put loyalty to the highest moral principles and to country above loyalty to government persons, party, or department. 9, expose corruption wherever discovered. And 10, uphold these principles ever conscious that public office is a public trust. Once again, we're going to be looking at the Budget and Economic Outlook fiscal years 2002 to 2011. That based on the assumptions contained in the report, a 5.6 trillion budget surplus over 10 years was projected. This report was issued in January 2001, right at the end of the Clinton administration. Because the report is a projection, we're going to look at the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants Audit and Accounting Guide, specifically at the Guide for Prospective Financial Information, also known as Forecasts and Projections. Section 6.09 addresses the issue at hand. Specifically, the section states, the potential to mislead a third-party reader of financial forecasts is greater than for historical statements. So the issue at hand is the heightened potential for the ability to mislead third parties based on a projection. And does an intentional misrepresentation of a projection constitute a violation of the Code of Ethics for Government Service? 609 also states, good faith also includes exercising care not to mislead a third-party reader. Accordingly, financial forecasts should be presented in conformity with the presentation guidelines in Chapter 8 of this guide, including appropriate disclosures. Therefore, a good faith presentation requires appropriate disclosures. 6.30 states, assumptions are the essence of developing financial forecasts and are the single most important determinant of such statements. Therefore, in the case of the CBO report, the single most important determinant of those statements were their assumptions. The AICPA states in 6.37, small changes in certain assumed conditions can result in relatively large variations in the prospective results, while relatively large changes in other assumptions cause only minor shifts in the prospective result. So obviously the assumptions to consider first are the major assumptions. One of the major assumptions in the 2001 CBO report is highlighted here by Representative Earl Pomeroy. On March 8, 2001, Representative Pomeroy said, the 5.6 trillion projected surplus is based on an optimistic revenue forecast stretching out 10 years. This graph was taken from the 2001 CBO report, and it highlights how revenues were projected forward from the temporary revenue spike of 2000. The red line specifically shows how individual income taxes were projected forward for 10 years from the peak of 2000. This graph indicates how the pink line, which represents the individual and corporate and estate taxes, spiked above the dotted yellow line, which is the nominal GDP, and how that difference was highest in 2000. And from that large increase of tax revenues to GDP, they were projected forward for 10 years, as exemplified by that red line. Included in this 2001 CBO report is this statement. The primary negative risk is that the current slowdown might turn into a recession. The deceleration has been surprisingly rapid. Although those developments must be watched carefully, they do not as yet constitute a strong reason to expect a recession. So one of the major assumptions of the CBO was that we would not go into a recession, but we did starting in March 2001, just 2 months after this report was issued. Therefore, one of the major assumptions of the 2001 CBO report was not met. And the balance of this graph shows how the revenues declined with the fall in the stock market and the recession that began in March of 2001. Here is a comparison of actual versus projected revenue lines. This example exemplifies how small changes in certain assumed conditions can result in relatively large variations in the prospective results. So Representative Earl Pomeroy on March 8, 2001 was correct that the 5.6 trillion projected surplus is based on an optimistic revenue forecast stretching out for 10 years. But we know the potential to mislead a third-party reader of financial forecasts is greater than that for historical statements. But on Representative Pomeroy, who proudly serves North Dakota, on his March 14, 2008 website, he states that the 5.6 trillion budget surplus turned into a 3.2 trillion deficit. So on his website, he portrays the 5.6 trillion budget surplus as if it was a reality and doesn't even state that it's based on a projection, let alone any of the assumptions that were included in the projection to arrive at the 5.6 trillion. And of course, he ignores his own words in 2001 that states the 5.6 trillion budget surplus projection was based on an optimistic revenue forecast. So all three North Dakota Democrats have changed positions on the certainty of the 5.6 trillion projected surplus from 2001 to 2007 or 2008. Senator Conrad said there is nothing certain about a projection of 5.6 trillion of surpluses. Senator Dorgan stated the projected 10 years surpluses are just that, projections, and are not at all certain. And Representative Pomeroy stated that 5.6 trillion was based on an optimistic revenue forecast stretching out 10 years. Then in 2007 or 2008, Senator Conrad said Bush inherited a record 5.6 trillion surplus. Senator Dorgan said the economic projections in 2001 showed the U.S. would have a 5.6 trillion surplus in the coming decade. And Representative Pomeroy said the 5.6 trillion surplus turned into a 3.2 trillion debt. Therefore, all three elected officials have changed their position on the 5.6 trillion projected surplus from uncertain in 2001 to certain in 2007 or 2008. If the changing of positions from 2001 to 2007 or 8 was equivalent to flipping a coin, we have three Democratic politicians from North Dakota. We have two possibilities, yes or no, for the possible outcomes for changing positions on the certainty of the 5.6 trillion projected surplus. That, of course, is based on one 2001 CBO report, and that results in 8. The total possibilities for a change in position, which is calculated as 2 raised to the third power. And as a result of that, there is one combination out of those 8 possibilities that all 3 would change positions. That's a 12.5% chance if that was the equivalent to flipping coins. So why did all 3 change positions? Because the potential to mislead a third-party reader of financial forecasts is greater than that for historical statements. Using Black's Law Dictionary, implied intent, a person's state of mind that can be inferred from speech or conduct or from language to which the person is party. Based on implied intent, their change in position is no accident or random act. Public office is a public trust. Representative Pomeroy, is your intentional misrepresentation of material facts associated with the 2001 CBO projection a violation of public trust? But we know the potential to mislead a third-party reader of financial forecasts is greater than that for historical statements.